right, welcome to the Worlds Beyond podcast. My name is Don Kianian.
My name is Benjamin Wiener.
And Jelitza Cintron.
And this is the first episode of the Worlds Beyond podcast, where we're going to dive into all of the things that make up some of the immersive virtual reality experiences you've consumed on various platforms, whether it's the Horizon Worlds platforms or other ones. And we're going to be bringing on a lot of industry subject matter experts and thought leaders to provide their insights onto what goes into building these immersive experiences. Today we have Jelitza Cintron, who is a design whiz and expert and has been working closely with Ben on the Habit team on some of the experiences they've been building in Horizon Worlds. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jelitza?
So my name is Jelitza. I've definitely been an art enthusiast practically all my life. I started off as a fine artist, working my way up into college, doing some light visual arts, like with my visual arts major. Of course, I did 3D modeling, I did sculpting, painting, and all of that. Fast forward, I got myself a headset and boom, hit the ground running. You know, it's been the best experience.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about how you and Ben started working together.
He reached out to me. He saw a bunch of stuff that I've made online. And he's like, hey, you want to do a little something with the company? And I said, hey, why not? Let's go.
Well, we started working together 2 or 3. I don't even remember how long it was. It feels like 2 or 3 years ago. We had been contracted on a sort of 2P project, which sadly never saw the light of day because it was really cool. But yes. Jelitza was recommended to me by, one of my other contractors at the time. And so, I reached out and it was one of the best, one of the best calls I think I made, one of the best business decisions I've made, over the years.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
And you've been really kind of deep in the trenches working on a couple of big projects with the Habit team. One of them, I think, that some people probably have some exposure with on the Horizon Worlds platform is plants, right? Tell us a little bit about the work you did with plants.
Plants definitely became my baby. About plants, I mean, where to get started? Benjamin came to me with the idea, and I said, hey, I love anything that is nature, anything that is floral. That's like my thing. And so he was like, well, I want a big greenhouse. And I was like, okay. So we started iterating on what kind of greenhouse, we were thinking Victorian era, but in my mind, it wasn't going to be kind of like a small space. So it had to make sense. And those old school Victorian greenhouses tend to be, very, very tall, has a lot of space to do a lot of things, like grow actual trees in there. Like that's the best part about these Victorian greenhouses. We laid down the layout, and the rest is history, really. I went straight to work in Maya, and I must have had that greenhouse ready by a week or so.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been an experience. A lot of plants.
Yeah. Fast forward, and now there's how many unique types of plants in the game now?
30. Let's see. Okay. 24. There's 34 unique plants in the world.
Yeah, I mean, and it's even spawned this kind of like spin-off experience with bugs, right? So it's clearly a very immersive and enjoyable experience for the world hoppers that are kind of hopping in and experiencing it. And Ben, tell us a little bit about kind of what you had in your mind when you were kind of coming up with this idea, and how you approached Jelitza with it, and how you guys worked together in order to kind of bring the idea from brain to paper to Maya to headset.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, at the time we've been doing project work. That's our bread and butter is a lot of like consulting work or some light studio support. And we were kind of in we kind of had like a gap on the art side of things. And I was like, okay, well, we got to have something for Jelitza to do. And so a lot of what I do is when I'm thinking about like what sort of games should we be making, is, I think like, what do I think Meta would like to see on the platform? Like, what is something that isn't really being done? I like to sort of design outside of sort of whatever the mainstream trend is at the time. I had this idea for plants, and it's pretty straightforward. It's a gardening simulator. It's not, it's not, it's not rocket science. But part of it is like looking at the success of games like like Animal Crossing and Harvest Moon and oh gosh, it's the farm one. It's 2D. It came out in Stardew Valley. That's it. Looking at successful games like that, I think that the cozy gaming is a huge market. It's not one that has been super, super saturated on, in Horizon Worlds. And I just thought that it would be fun to make. It was something I was excited to make but I'll say that our motivation for making it, our company, like we make content, but we're not content creators, right? Like that's not what HabitXR is. So we really built it out with the intention of it being a portfolio piece. We were very fortunate that like it did catch Meta's attention, and we got featured. They made some marketing material for it. There's actually a Plants Quest right now. You spend 30 minutes in plants, and you get some fashion tickets to unlock new avatar wearables. But yeah, so that was sort of like where the idea came from. And then we went to Jelitza, and like she said, like we kind of, I sort of had this idea of like like I had like sort of it pictured in my head, and then Jelitza put together this incredible mood board and, started getting some source materials, put all that together, and we agreed on sort of the art direction. And then she went to town, and I'll never forget it. I had started prototyping. Plants is actually built out 95% out of code blocks, which is Horizon, Meta Horizon Worlds, like Scratch is sort of the equivalent of that. But I started building it out, and I built out like the growing mechanics and stuff like that. And I'll never forget the first model that Jelitza made was this snake plant. And I mean, to this day, I think it's like still one of the best looking plants in the in the game. I love that one, and that's what I was using when I was prototyping. Was that? But it really came together. A lot of it was less like ability to like churn out plants and stuff. It was more like, okay, well, it's one artist and one developer, and how are we tackling this sort of massive project? It wound up taking us like, I think we built plants in like 4 or 5 months. And then of course we went on to do like additional content. We built out like an expansion and stuff like that. I'd say that the development process was actually like pretty smooth. I'd say smoother than Bugs. Bugs was one of those projects that like I went into it thinking that it was going to be like pretty easy now that we'd like knocked out plants. And then I was like, oh, actually, yeah, these sort of feature expansions that we're doing are actually a lot more complicated than I had originally thought about. And we wound up bringing in some outside contractors to like assist in that, towards the end of that project.
And was there anything that you learned in the process of working with Jelitza on plants on this kind of like first go experience that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of, like as you were building these on your own, or any advice for, up and coming world builders who are looking to work with designers for the first time, on how to make sure you're adequately representing the concept of the experience that you're trying to build, and making sure the designer is on board and understands kind of the aesthetic you're going for? Any tips that you can, give for those types of world builders?
Yeah. I'll say this, like, going into building plants, like Jelitza and I have been doing this professionally for years. Even before she came on to HabitXR, Jelitza was doing this, for other studios, and we've worked on a million projects. So we had the advantage of coming in with that professional experience, with already sort of being accustomed to that environment. So I think that a lot of what I see on like the Discord and Facebook, is like, people are like, I have a great idea for a world and I'm looking for collaborators. And what they mean is, I have a great idea for a world and I'm looking for people to build it for me. And, the reality is that, like, even just like game design, even, you know, there are plenty of projects where my role is game designer, right? Where I'm just doing that. I'm not doing any programming. I'm not doing any art or anything like that. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of meetings. And it's work. It's real work. And it's a lot more difficult than I think people understand to have a vision and then properly communicate it. I think that like getting good at communication is really important. And I think approaching a project from, you know, from a source of truth is really important. So one of the things that I do in the GDD or game design document is I put together, you know, the very first two like paragraphs. Like number one is like I do like a little like 30 like an elevator pitch style. This is what the game is, you know. For example, the vision for Plants is a cozy simulation game about caring for houseplants. The VR edition is a social space where players can grow plants together, hunt for bugs, and contribute towards a growing magical tree. The entirety of the game takes place within a Victorian-style, overgrown greenhouse. Elevator pitch, super simple to understand, very straightforward. But then we talk about pillars. And the pillars are very much guidelines for design decisions. So our core pillars for Plants were cozy, cooperative, and plants, right? And the coziness is like, hey, like this is a cozy game. We're here, like this is not supposed to be, it's not competitive. It's not supposed to be stressful. We're keeping it very low key. People are working together. We don't want people competing for points or like competing for who grows the most plants or anything like that. And then plants is just like the plants are the heroes of the piece. Like it's really important that we feature those. And then because we sort of had that source of truth, when Jelitza and I are having discussions about it, we're able to like circle back. And even if we're having a disagreement, I'm like, okay, like what's the coziest answer? What's the most cooperative answer? What's the most plant oriented answer? And that really helps. And I think like another thing to be aware of is like, how are you approaching, you know, these core values? And for me, like I'm a game designer, I do some development work. I'm very much an art must serve function type of approach. Whereas like Jelitza as an artist, like often comes from the approach of like the function needs to serve the art. And neither of those are wrong, but you can't do both. You know, you can't do both at the same time, or at least like you need to, like everything needs to be rowing in the same direction. Everything needs to be aligned. So it's just really important for us to like be on the same page about like what design philosophy we're taking, you know, on a particular project. And, you know, that can change project to project. And, you know, like I said, there's no real right or wrong approach, but it's important that like you stay aligned with that approach throughout the production process.
Yeah. And Jelitza, as you were building this experience and working with Ben, you know, how did you approach some of those decisions? Like, how did you decide what was the cozy choice? Or how did you make sure that the plants were still remaining the heroes of the experience, even, you know, as you started building new features or designing new elements and that sort of thing?
Well, one special thing about the plants is they were very much an experiment to me. I wanted to see how far I can push that experiment. Instead of using texturing techniques, I actually used vertex painting. And so with that said, I had to put a lot of detail into those plants in order for me to be able to put as much dynamic colors into the piece. Pretty much, I had my own kind of like set guideline in how I was going to approach each plant. And fortunately enough, like towards the end, we also had Mike the Guru come in, and basically I was able to communicate how I was doing the plants since I had done so many already. I just stuck to my guns on that. And now for everything else, you know, including the greenhouse itself, everything else was made very well simple, but not so simple, of course. There was still a lot of modeling that I had to do in there. However, I tried to keep that as simple as possible, not taking away from the key elements, which was anything that had to do with gameplay. You know, the tables, they had to look interesting. So I put a little extra details in those. The carts, those carts I really wanted in there, and especially with the way they look with the tiny little awnings. So, elements like that really catch your eye in different directions on where they are was key. With that in mind, those were still simple. It's more simple than the actual plants themselves, so that I can actually spend all the geometry on those pieces. I love the way each one of those plants, especially the poppies, are actually one of my favorites. And yeah, and the orchids. I do love the orchids. So the roses as well. I mean, the list can go on, but you get what I'm saying.
What's great about those poppies is that, we had just sort of released the first version of plants. And I think we'd released daisies was like our first expansion plant. And I was visiting my grandmother and I was telling her about this. And, she's in her mid 80s. She doesn't really know what I do, right? She doesn't really get it. But I was showing her, pictures on my phone. I was telling her about it. And I was like, what do you think, Grammy? Like, what if you could put a plant in this game, what would you put in there? And she said, poppies. And I said, all right. And so I went back and Jelitza, made that beautiful model. And I brought it the next week. And I tell you, my grandmother was so excited, just thrilled to see that they had been modeled and put in the game. And so that's one of those plants that really has sort of like a special story behind why it's there.
What was the most challenging plant to design and implement, or the one that surprised you the most, the one that like you thought would be easy enough to do but turned out to be a hair-raising effort?
Yes. Oh my gosh, the one that like I had a little trouble with the design, and it was supposed to be like the easiest thing was I forget what is it, like the lady's shoe. I forget which one.
Venus slipper. Yeah.
The Venus slipper. That one I wanted to pull my hair out because I'm like, this is just not right. And it's actually supposed to be like one of those real specialty plants, and that one made me doubt my abilities. I'm not going to lie.
So what made that one so difficult?
Well, it was the overall shape, because it kind of looks like an orchid, right? But if you get the proportions wrong, it just doesn't look right, And there was parts where I'm like, this looks kind of dusty. Like this is not it, this is not cute. And when things don't look cute, I'm like, I don't know, So I kept having to try on that one, and finally I was like, okay, you're done. Ship it. Yeah. On to the next, because I just wanted to just go down the line and just create the next things, which I mean, it became endless at some point.
Yeah. So it sounds like whether it's, to draw focus to one area or another, or whether it's, just getting the models to a place where you're happy enough with them. It sounds like the devil's in the details, right? Like whether it's, textures or proportions or shapes, it's like every little thing can make or break a design.
Right. Absolutely. And that is part of like my weakness. I need to love it, and like, I am very passionate in that, like, I need to like be happy with, I'm not going to put anything that just looks halfway. Like it needs to make sense. It needs to make sense for this, for the space. It needs to make sense in the color, So if I'm not happy with it, then I'm like, I'm holding back. I'm like, I don't want to put my name on this one. That's just how it is. Yeah.
I think like one of the things in plants, and we did this in bugs too, with like the trees, is, some of these sort of like side elements, I call them scatter, but like these sort of side elements, environmental elements. I think Jelitza had a like original version of like the bushes, like the hedges that are in there, that was like much higher detail. And we wound up, she wound up going back and like simplifying and replacing it. And she used this technique where it's like the hedge itself is basically like a blob, right? Like it's a good looking blob, but it's a blob. And then she threw some little cutout leaves on top of it. to give it sort of the illusion of being higher detail than it actually is. And it was great because they look really nice and they help, we do use them to help divide up the space in the environment, but we're able to do so in such a way that isn't taking away from the hero pieces, the plants themselves, and we're able to do that in much higher detail. I think I remember I posted erroneously an image of like an in progress plant, and like someone commented on it like, oh, that looks pretty heavy, and it's like, yes, that's the point, right? Like it is pretty heavy for Horizon. We did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Well, and that was part of the experiment, really, because I wanted to see how far I can push the details. Like, like low poly. I understood that. Trust me, I've been on projects where I had to the T, had to keep it low poly. But I was like, let me just push this and see if this is true, and that's one thing I do like to do is I want to see if I can break something, and if not, I go back and I fix it. Not a big deal. And so that was basically part of it. Like I could have easily just taken a lot of these plants and basically do this kind of like carded version where I would draw the leaves instead of sculpt them out, and then like basically texture them. However, that would have been more heavy on the game itself, having all of these multiple textures. And that was the point of me using the vertex painting. If I could just do an entire world with just vertex coloring, let's see how well it performs rather than the latter, which would be a textured world. Don't get me wrong, a textured world is still my love. However, like why not see what boundaries I can push in the other direction? And I feel like we pretty much successfully have done it. We did the thing.
Yeah. And speaking of pushing boundaries and breaking things, right? One of the big shifts that happened with Meta somewhat recently was the shift from, headset first VR experiences to these like mobile friendly VR experiences, right? How did that shift impact any of the design or gameplay elements of plants, if at all? Or was it pretty easy to port that stuff over?
Well, I'll say this. So we originally did not anticipate, like Plants is a VR first game. Bugs is mobile first, but Plants is VR first. And we built it out because, again, our goal for that world was to be a portfolio piece. We just wanted to like show what can be done in Horizon Worlds and show that we kind of know what we're doing, right? Basically, I think it was like in April, right? It was like a week or two after we released it. Meta reached out and was like, "This is awesome. Can you make it mobile friendly?"
Scramble.
Right. And the answer to how difficult that was is, I'm going to say, not difficult, because I reached out to the very talented Melissa, aka Pigeon number 12, and said, "Hey, if I give you some money, will you make this mobile compatible for me?" And so she did a great job. We wound up, I think Blender 93 did some camera API work for us, on that as well. But yeah, essentially, I'll say I'm a proficient coder, but I hadn't at the time. I hadn't played around too much with the sort of like mobile tools that Meta had. I have since then, right? Now I'm very, very familiar with the mobile tools, but they're still like very brand new, very, very new, and very limiting. So we did wind up making Plants mobile friendly, but it's very much in the sense that, like, okay, because a lot of the text is small, we adjust your camera when you go up to like read stuff. I will say that like there isn't a whole lot of text in Plants. Like we did focus on having like very visual tutorials, instead of saying like water, use your watering can to water your plant. It's a picture of a watering can with like water coming out of it, onto a plant.
There's reasons for that, though. And mainly because we know sometimes people just don't want to read.
Yeah.
Most of the time, 99% of the time, people don't want to read. Yeah.
So Jelitza, were there any like plant models you had to redesign for the shift to mobile, or was it all pretty easy to port over?
No, they were uh, easy, like super easy. And I feel like that transition very much like in the art sense of it all, very much had to do with the fact that we didn't have that much texture to render in that world. There don't get it twisted. Like there is texture in there. The skybox is a texture. There's a tree outside that has a texture. All the informational stuff, the cards, the plant facts, all of that. They're all textures, but really, in reality, there's really not a lot to freeze up a world.
Well, and I'll say just from like a couple of technical comments on that. So like our skybox, quote unquote, is, making your own skybox isn't actually something like a real skybox isn't actually something you can do in Horizon. So for us, we have this inverted sphere, which is great because we can then rotate that and have a day-night cycle, right?
Yeah.
Which is really, really magical in that world. Also, like you're not really porting things in Horizon Worlds because it's all one platform. There's essentially one world, and you can either access it through VR or you can access it through mobile. So a big part of like mobile compatibility is basically in the code, you say, if on a phone, do this. If on VR, do that, which definitely complicates a lot of the coding for it, and sort of being aware of that. And of course, like they changed the way that AFK works to be more mobile player friendly. So that wound up breaking a lot of things that like you wouldn't sort of expect to break, like objects held by players who go AFK, like they don't have a world exit or a release event that sends. So you have to like check to see if they're going AFK and put in stuff. And it was like seriously breaking the game because of how object ownership works. And we had to put in specific lines of code that like forced object ownership back to the server after a player goes AFK. So that was like, as far as like porting to mobile, for the most part, for plants, I'll say for the most part, it was very much like a sort of code side, changes. For bugs, which we did go in to make as a mobile first game, I think there was a lot more consideration for that mobile first experience on the art side of things.
I mean, we've talked a lot about the visual design and game and user experience, gameplay design elements that go into these experiences, rightfully so, right? That's like the main way that these players are interacting with these experiences. But an area that we haven't really talked about is the sound design element of creating these atmospheres in Horizon Worlds and in other platforms too. But from my perspective as a sound designer and like a audio engineer, I can tell you that having properly placed sounds with corresponding volumes and stereo width and panning and all that stuff to create that sense of directionality for people in these kind of 360 experiences is really important for some of those like audio cues and, bypassing some of the text instructions like you were talking about earlier. By using pictures, you can create sort of, alerts, notifications, draw the user to areas using sound cues. But I also know that that's not necessarily as easy to accomplish in Horizon Worlds, right? Can you guys talk a little bit about how you went about building in sound design elements for plants and kind of the limitations or considerations that went into that?
You should take it on the catching bugs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, so I'll say, like, first of all, like, plants isn't very big. So a lot of the so to talk about Horizon Worlds is the sound design is like you have a little cube that is your sound that you pull out of a menu and you drop it somewhere in the world. And like they have a few sliders for like volume and pitch and like, is this a looping sound? Does it play on world start? By like the tool, like, it's not Fmod, right? Like you're not getting like really high fidelity stuff. Like you can't import audio Horizon Worlds, you know, as a 3P creator, you know. You know, a lot of the audio comes from, you know, a lot of that audio comes from like a menu that like Horizon provides. And like, that's where the music implants is from. It's just like from the stock menu that we just put in there. It's like this light piano music that does like very, you know, ambient noise. You know, we do use a lot of audio for like to notify players when something they've done has had an impact on the world. Like when you pull the trigger on the, you know, and you're holding a watering can, like you hear like a water stream sound. And then when the water like hits something, the stream sound stops and you hear a splash noise, right. The sort of the bug noise thing that Jelitza is referring to. So because going through 2D UIs is really annoying, a lot of times when I'm programming, what I'll do is I'll just pull out a little recording gizmo and I'll make a noise as like a placeholder, you know, because I need the audio feedback to make sure it's working. And I just like I was designing the noise for when you catch a bug, and the intention was like, you know, you needed to like, I wanted to have like a whoosh, like a net sound. But I did a search. I couldn't find it right away. So I was just like, you know, like I'll deal with this later. I'm just going to record a noise. And I just went, I hit the recorder and I said, wham. And so I'm in there in the world. And part of the great part about Horizon Worlds is the collaborative world building. You can like all sort of be working on the project together in there at the same time. So I'm in there testing out the bug catching mechanic, and, you know, Jelitza, and I think David was in there with us too.
Yes.
We're like basically setting, you know, doing the scene and placing things around. And they just keep hearing that here, wham, 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 and they're like, "What is that?" I was like, "Oh, you know, like it's just a placeholder sound," but you know,
and we loved it.
Yeah. I was like, "Don't worry, guys, I'm going to replace it," and they said, "No, you're not." And so it's a little iconic. Like people, like they're like, "Oh, what is? Are you saying boink? Are you saying point? Are you like what?" I was like, "It's just a nasally whack."
Yeah,
you know, it's a you know a wet, and so yeah, and we went on to make like that noise has carried on to bugs, right? It's in there too. So it's become kind of iconic. We should get T-shirts made.
Just
some
merch. Yeah.
with a bug.
Yeah.
So falling into bugs. So basically during my like in the very beginning during my gray boxing process, once I had brought in some mesh elements, I started bringing out some sound gizmos and stuff. And for like the water, I really wanted the experience of like really hearing that waterfall, you know, going, but not too harsh, not too like distracting even. I just wanted it to be a little more on the serene side of things. So I definitely paid attention a lot to that detail. And now as far as like the atmospheric part of it, I really wanted to hear those bugs sing. I wanted to know that in the space, there is life, you know, even though you don't see them yet, you know, you really can hear the little crickets, the little cicadas. I mean, because I'm pretty sure there is a cicada sound in there just to, you know, spice it up. But you really wanted to feel like there is a whole lot of bugs to find in this world. So to me, like when I thought of bringing those out, I really wanted to sell that, you know, as far as that. And now for the music, there should have been a lot more, especially with the zoning and everything. But I feel like at the time we were kind of cutting it close. So we just kept with the main song, to me, which is fine. I could listen to that song the whole time, to be honest.
And we have.
Yes, and we sure have. So we stuck to one background song, and yeah, and then we have our wham.
The iconic wham
all over the place. Well, you know, and you know, like I said, like we've worked on projects before. I've worked with, you know, dedicated audio engineers on Horizon Worlds, and they do great work. And it's like, it's not like you can't use that skill set in Horizon. it's certainly a lot better than, anything I can do. But it's just like a lot of sound engineering in Horizon is like placing the sound and then going in and walking around and being like, okay, does this sound right? Okay, let me change some stuff, and so, there was like at one point, so Jelitza had like put in like all the crickets and stuff. And I think I spent like an hour or two just adjusting like where the cricket noises, like the cicada noises were coming from, to, give a little more variety as you walk around. But yeah, as Jelitza said, so we actually like had been working on bugs for quite a while, and then they announced this competition, and we were like, well, we may as well submit it, right? So we got down to the wire on that. I think we all would have liked to have had like another month to work on bugs, but we wound up taking third place overall. So not complaining about that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, third place for a first showing isn't half bad. Yeah.
Oh, second showing. I actually took first place back in 2022.
Oh, okay, not bad at all. Yeah, I remember when I was first hopping into Horizon Worlds in my like VR journey. And this was, a year or two ago. So things might have changed since then. But I remember that sound block that you're talking about. And,
yeah.
And we had to, I was building a world with a friend of mine, and I wanted to make this kind of ambient bonfire, campfire type chill space with like beer pong and cornhole and a roaring fire and a zip line and all this kind of stuff. And I couldn't figure out how to, add the little like sound cues that I wanted that weren't in like the native library or whatever. And so I think for the fire sound, I had to like do like on my own kind of thing to like make it sound right or something like that. It's so janky, but hopefully at some point Meta will kind of revamp that sound block a little bit to make it a little bit more customizable and configurable, because that sound design element is huge for world immersion. I mean,
well, so yes, for VR, number one, I think sound is incredibly important for VR. However, caveat here, mobile is what's going to be big for Horizon Worlds next. I mean, there's a huge push. The competition that they did last time was for mobile first games. That's a huge flag to say, hey, Meta cares about mobile. Your games should be mobile, right? You should be making mobile games on Horizon Worlds. It's not easy, right? It's a VR engine that you're trying to build with limited mobile tools that you're trying to build mobile games on. But that seems to be speculation, like what they're looking for. I mean, that's what I'd put my money on. And mobile users, mics off,
right?
Sound off,
right?
And so the visuals are really, really, I mean, and again, anyone coming from mobile knows this. Mobile is about flashy, eye-catching type gameplay. And, that's something that, like, I think a lot of content creators in Horizon Worlds are going to need to adjust to as they build new content. I mean, that being said, the majority of the population on Horizon for now is still VR players. So it still has to, be a good experience in VR to get the traffic if that's what your goal is, which I guess like it should be, right? For us, it's a little different because like we're building portfolio pieces, we're building things that we want Meta to look at, that we want potential clients to look at. But for the average, like if you're a studio or if you're like an independent content creator, retention is king, right? Or queen. You have to drive traffic somehow. And, the VR users currently make up most of the population. And so like you still need to be able to attract them, but you also want to like future proof your experience by making it super, super mobile friendly. And a big difference between those two is that like VR players will walk around to do things. Like think about any modern mobile game, like they're all menus. Right. You're not, maybe the actual gameplay you're moving around, but it's like, you're not like walking to the shop. You just press a button and you're in the shop.
Right.
Then you press another button and you're in the game itself. And then you press another button and you're in like the upgrade screen. So I really think that it's going to be super, super important to take a really close look at user experience for both of those and build them in parallel with each other, because you can't just like forget one. You have to do both on Horizon. It's like a hidden scope trap, right? You know, it's like you're going into building. You're not just building for one audience, for one, you know, type of game. You really do need to build for both, and the expectations of those audiences are very different.
Yeah, and you know, we've covered a lot of ground on this podcast talking about all these different design elements that go into building these worlds, whether it's on headset or mobile. You know, I think, you know, distilling it down to some key tips and learnings for world builders, you know, don't discount the mobile, you know, aspect of it. Keep that in mind when you're building these experiences. Design or keep the details for the designs you want to take focus in the experiences and draw the focus of your players to those elements. And then not neglecting the sound design, but finding ways to work around some of the limitations in the current Horizon Worlds paradigm. Any other kind of key tips that you think are really important for these world builders to keep in mind as they're designing these experiences?
Number one, you know, just to like reiterate what we said, like if you are working with a team, make sure that you are aligned in your vision and that you are all rowing the boat in the same direction. I think like there's nothing worse than getting halfway through a project and realizing that you've been building two different projects. And then the other, like the biggest tip, like, so, you know, I think there's like two people that I think like would benefit, you know, two types of people that would really benefit from, you know, the sort of stuff we're talking about. You know, number one is studios. And I think that's less of a problem for them because, you know, they have a lot of that experience, and a lot of like the tips and tricks that are helpful for them are like, hey, like this is how the rendering system works in Horizon, you know, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more in the future. But then it's also for independent content creators, and Jelitza will, I'm sure, echo this. It's like actually practice, like actually get good at what you're trying to do, actually learn, like go out and learn.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be obsessed with it. You have to have sleepless nights. You have to study. You have to like really zero in on it, focus one subject at a time, because if not, you will struggle, and you will struggle until you learn that it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be that difficult. Just practice. You know, don't dream it. Don't, you know, be what is it? Don't speak about it, be about it type of thing.
Yeah.
You know,
don't be an idea guy.
Yeah. So as long as you get your hands dirty, you will reap the benefits.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, just hop in and get to work. Don't stress about how you're going to do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
you can't brute force it. You do have to like learn, you know, you have to open your mind to learning, but it's work too, you know, it's not, there's no shortcut.
Well, yeah, I think we covered a lot of really good ground here on this podcast. Thank you, Jelitza and Ben, for taking the time to talk with us about all of this. You know, anything that you want to point people towards, any up and coming events or things of note in the Plants and Bugs universe that people should keep an eye out for?
Well, we've Plants is now content complete. So we've released our last plant. So you can check out that full experience. Bugs is still, you know, we still have content plans for that. We're actually slammed on the project side of things, which is great for us. You know, you know, we're really, really busy right now. So we'll probably see some releases later in the year for Bugs. But as far as like plugs go, I mean, if you haven't been to Horizon Worlds, check it out. Like you know, there's certainly a level of jank to it, but I think there's some really, you know, really marvelous stuff out there. But, you know, check out Plants, check out Bugs. You know, I think that they're really good examples of like what's possible on the platform and like level of fidelity that you can get in particular. So like, you know, shout out to Jelitza for the incredible art design that she's done on those worlds.
Thank you.
And I'd say if you're a studio or if you are someone who's like looking to invest time into building Horizon, you know, in Horizon Worlds professionally, you know, reach out to us. I love having this conversation. I had a conversation this morning someone from over in the UK, and just talked about Horizon and its idiosyncrasies and stuff like that. For like an hour. You can reach me at Benjamin at habitxr.net. This is the sort of thing that I love talking about. And you can tell by how long this sentence has gone on that I love talking about it. So,
and then we'll put, all kinds of social and Discord links and whatnot in the description for this podcast. But definitely join the HabitXR community Discord for all the updates on plants and bugs, bit.ly/habitxr, all caps. And then, we hope to see you guys on future episodes of the Worlds Beyond podcast. Make sure you drop us a subscribe if you want to stay tuned for more episodes. We're going to have tons of other guests on in future episodes, and we're even going to highlight worlds in Horizon Worlds with the creators themselves. So definitely stay tuned for the future episodes. And thanks for listening.
Cheers.